Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Kaja Figlarska, and I'm a sales support specialist at Kirkhoff Technologies, MSP, which is a managed service provider. And joining me today is our VCAO and AVP projects, Isabel Schmidt. She works with our clients to create a vision for information technology that meets the organization's objectives, and then she works with our project team to implement that vision. Welcome to our webinar once again. We will have a Q&A section later on, so feel free to leave any of your questions in the chat, and we will make sure to respect your time and start right away. So good luck, Isabel.
Thank you, Kaya. All right, so this is part of a larger series that we're doing on the entire Microsoft Modern Workplace, all of the different apps and things that are included in it. And SharePoint has a very special place inside of the Microsoft Modern Workplace because of its level of integration with all of the rest of the tools. If you're using the modern Microsoft suite, you're already using SharePoint, whether you know it or not. So we're going to dig into a little bit about how this all works together inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. So all of these applications that are running on the Microsoft Cloud Services, they all need a place to put information. And some of it is stored inside of platforms like Exchange Online, that's like your email and stuff like that. But just about everything else has a home inside of SharePoint in one way or another. And so what we're going to talk about today is how SharePoint kind of brings this all together and how you can make the most out of it. So digital transformation with the modern work, the nature of work is really changing, and it's about changing your organization, not just the technology. The nature of work has changed. Employees expect to be able to work securely from just about anywhere on any kind of device without necessarily dealing with site-to-site VPNs between remote offices or work from home. It's all about using the device that you have when you need it to access the data that you need in the most effective way. And that's what's really transformative about the entire Microsoft Modern Workplace. So SharePoint at its core is a data repository. It allows for simple file sharing and collaboration. It can be a team site, a company homepage to engage your organization with. It can break down silos of information, bring organizational knowledge together in one location, in one place. And it can really, as we'll dig into in the demos and things, it can really transform your organization's processes in how you get data, how you process data, how you store data, and ultimately how you analyze and make decisions based on that data. Microsoft Teams is very heavily integrated into SharePoint. And what we'll kind of talk about is taking it a level above, just simply having conversations. Teams can be used for calls and meetings, but it can also be used to develop custom solutions, and it can be a new workflow and a new way to access your organization's data and collaborate with your team. Microsoft OneDrive is also a part of the SharePoint ecosystem. It's an individual user's SharePoint location and space. So OneDrive is used, it's the cloud storage for end users. It helps backup and synchronize data across multiple devices. So things like a user's desktop or a documents folder is available on any device. And like SharePoint, it's heavily integrated into the rest of the Microsoft 365 suite. It has all of the same features of SharePoint because it is SharePoint. How does this all kind of correspond to how you use data and where to put it? OneDrive, you can think of as like your personal business documents. It's documents that you're working on individually, say like drafts of things that you're not ready to collaborate with other people on. It's your stuff in your documents folders, in your desktop, if you've got pictures and things like that on your work computer, that's all stored in OneDrive. When it comes time to start collaborating and sharing that information with other people in your team, that's when you move it into your Microsoft Teams SharePoint site. So every Microsoft team has SharePoint, and some channels also have SharePoint sites. So all of this data storage inside of Microsoft Teams is on SharePoint. And then you can have dedicated SharePoint sites, which are used as kind of publishing spaces. So the way this might look like is, say somebody in human resources, they might be working individually out of their OneDrive on drafting a new policy. When it comes time to collaborate with the rest of the management team on that policy, they might move that from their OneDrive into the management SharePoint team, where they can do collaboration on that with other people. And then when it's ready to roll out the policy to the entire organization, that's when it might go and it'd be published as a PDF, for example, on the internal team site for everybody in the organization to be able to reference. So SharePoint and Teams, as we noted, are deeply interconnected and integrated. Teams is really kind of seen as the single pane of glass for everything that is the Microsoft 365 suite. And what we're going to do is a little bit of a demonstration of that in a few minutes. But every team in Microsoft Teams has a SharePoint site, and channels inside of that team are the folders and the structures inside of the document library that's inside of SharePoint. Another really powerful feature in Microsoft SharePoint that we're going to demo today is SharePoint lists. So SharePoint lists can be used for collecting data and analytics. They're highly customizable. You can create automated workflows based on the data that's in them. And at the end of the day, you can also wind up building out end user applications. And that's when it becomes really, really powerful, because then you're starting to empower your first line workers. And so this can be everything from people utilizing like a mobile device, like a phone or an iPad out in the field. It can be a workers inside of an office at a desktop computer. It can be a remote worker working on a laptop in a work from home environment. And all of this data is all synchronized and works across all of the devices. So as we noted before, it's what it really comes down to. It's having your end users have the data that they need, where they need it, when they need it on the device that they have available to them. So what does this all kind of look like in practice? We're going to do a little bit of a demo here, and we're going to start inside of Microsoft Teams. So this is kind of what standard Microsoft Teams might look like. We've got our internal teams here, and we're going to be focusing on my demonstration team here. So the demonstration team, the demo here, you can see it's always going to have the general channel, and then we've got additional channels below that. They're kind of sorted out through different subjects and things like that. So this might be a typical main team inside of a smaller organization doesn't have dedicated teams. When you are sharing documents and data and things like that, so say in this particular case, somebody's, well, me in this demo has shared a file inside of a chat. And this is something that you can collaborate on directly inside of Microsoft Teams. And just simply by uploading a file inside of a channel in Microsoft Teams, that of course ends up in the Files tab inside of Microsoft Teams. And from here, you can, of course, you can open it directly in Teams, you can open it in a web browser, or you can open it directly inside of your application. So if we chose to go ahead and open this in a web browser, we end up with a familiar interface for Microsoft Excel. And you don't necessarily need to always open the desktop application or anything like that. You can interact with this content right here inside of your web browser. Inside of SharePoint, on the SharePoint side of things, as we noted, we always have a SharePoint site that is associated with every team. So because we have a KTI demo team, we also have a KTI demo SharePoint site. And that SharePoint site is always going to have a document library. And the document library is going to have folders that correspond with all of the channels that we have inside of that team. So here, when we come into our accounting, we end up with that same files that we have right here. Same kind of options. We can open it in a browser. We can open it in the application. So in this case, I'm going to pop it open inside of Microsoft Excel because maybe you're a power user and that the web-based version or Teams-based version isn't working for you. And here we can see, because this is an online document that is connected directly to SharePoint, I wind up with the ability to do real-time collaboration with the other people. So this particular cursor spot here corresponds with where I have this document open. No, don't do that. Inside of SharePoint on the web-based version. So this document, whether it's on a mobile device or here inside of a web browser or directly inside of Microsoft Teams, this is an example of where I can collaborate on this without necessarily even, you don't even need to leave Teams. So we can have a conversation around it. We could have a meeting based around it. And everybody's always working off of the same content, the same files, all at the same time. So there's a really powerful collaboration capabilities that is introduced in using Teams and SharePoint together in this way. A really powerful feature of SharePoint is in Microsoft lists or SharePoint lists. So SharePoint lists are, you can think of as kind of like simplistic databases. They are in a database. All of the information is a database in there, but they're that your organization is able to create internally. So a few years ago, people would maybe create an Excel spreadsheet and try and track information and things like that in an Excel spreadsheet in order to, do basic data tracking and simple analytics. And while that can work, and it has worked for many organizations for a very long time, doing that kind of data collection and analytics inside of lists is a much more powerful way of doing it. So, for example, any piece of paper that you have in your organization that is a form that goes, gets filled out by somebody and gets sent through interoffice mail or whatever your process is, that kind of information generally can almost always be created inside of a Microsoft list. And what that gives your organization is it gives you the ability to create standardized forms with standardized input that's also connected and tied into the individuals that are utilizing it. So because I'm signed in to this computer, this web browser, and ultimately SharePoint, as myself, all of the interactions and things that I do with this are also done as me in my persona and my Microsoft account and identity. So whether or not you're making, a signature line or whatever it winds up being, if you're going to assign things out to different individuals, you can just simply start typing people's names into things, and I've assigned something to Kaya now, and she will wind up getting an email noting that this particular task and item has been assigned to her. SharePoint lists, really anything that you're tracking in Excel, inside of paper documents, things like that. Lists is an excellent place to transform that process and make it into a modern and more digitally accessible location. Microsoft has a huge number of built-in lists and templates, or you can start from them on your own. If we pop over to the home page here and just choose a new list, we'll be able to see a lot of these templates that Microsoft has created already that you can use as a starting point. If you've already got an Excel spreadsheet that you're doing some data tracking in and things like that in Excel, you can just simply use that as your template for creating a new Microsoft list, and it will bring in your existing data. With all of the things that Microsoft does, they like to start with the more complex features and then make them simpler and simpler and simpler. So although we have Microsoft lists, and this can be a fairly complicated interface to set up and manage, although it's very, very powerful, Microsoft would like a way for end users to be able to use this power of a list without necessarily being a SharePoint guru. And so what they've done is they've created a dedicated application in Microsoft 365 called Microsoft Lists. And as we can see here, this is a SharePoint list in a dedicated application that's it's a little bit less powerful. You can't use some of the most advanced features, but it's a lot more accessible to end users and office workers. And then from there, they've also wound up creating another more simple layer called Microsoft Forms. So whether you're using Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Lists, or SharePoint Lists in SharePoint, it's all the same capabilities and content, and they're all usable across all of those forms. So you can wind up with somebody creating a rather complex SharePoint list inside of SharePoint itself, but you may be somebody that's not as technical, is going to come across and create the form that's actually used for that. Forms can also be internal or external. So in this particular case, it's really simple for a person inside of an organization to decide what kind of data they want to collect, and who they want to collect the information from. If this is an internal document like it is here, because I'm signed in to Microsoft Suite, it knows who I am when I submit this form. You can also have forms that are publicly accessible. So perhaps your organization has a large constituency or community, and you need to collect information from that for the administrative purposes. Well, you can't necessarily give all of your clients or constituents access to your SharePoint in order to fill out those forms, but you could create a Microsoft list that collects all of the information that you want, and you could create a public-facing form that could go out in an email or on your website. And that information, although it can be submitted, would only be able to be interacted with your organization. Taking this all a step further, once we have forms and once we have lists, and we've created the database that we're looking for, you can also wind up creating different rules and automations based on that. So you could create workflow rules that send notifications. You can wind up with, when a new incident comes in or something like that, a certain set of automated tasks take place. This can also, one step further than just being on a website, this can also wind up being developed inside of Microsoft Power Apps. And this is where we start to get into kind of the citizen developer, where you've built an internal application for your organization, starting that's rooted inside of a SharePoint list. At the end of the day, it's just a database, and you just need a way to interact with the information. But maybe what people are interacting with is, a mobile device out on a cellular connection or out in the field. And that's where using something like Power Apps to create the application that uses the list as its backbone can create a lot of empowerment for first-line workers, shop workers, people out in the field where they don't necessarily need a full computer or anything. They just need to be able to take down information and submit it back to the office workers who are going to be processing the data and doing analytics on it. What does that kind of look like once it's time to actually take a look at your information? Well, Microsoft, being part of the ecosystem it is, has a lot of different ways that you can do that. So you can just simply grab it as, a comma-separated sheet or something if you needed to. If you're a Power user, maybe you're going to do your analytics in Power BI. For a lot of small businesses and smaller organizations, what they're looking for really, they're getting that information. Maybe they're storing it in Excel right now because that's how they know how to do their reporting. Well, SharePoint gives you a lot of power in that. When you download a Microsoft query file, this is going to create a brand new Excel spreadsheet. And this Excel spreadsheet, there we go, it's going to open, and it's going to tell me that it's got a data connection to it. And so we're just going to allow that data connection to take place. Oh, that was going to import there. Let me get this closed. Sorry. Open, enable. There we go. And so now we still have the ability to use Excel. We can still do our data analytics. We can, create pivot tables. We can create pivot charts. We can delve deep into it. But this is always going to wind up being connected back to that SharePoint site. So now you can wind up with an application on a mobile device that somebody out in the field or on a shop floor is filling out information in, that's going into a SharePoint list that's connected to an analytics platform like Power BI or Microsoft Excel. And that information is going to flow all the way through. Every time this Excel file is refreshed, it's going to pull in new information that has been submitted, and is being utilized in that form. SharePoint lists are a huge, huge game changer for smaller organizations that need to be able to build out simple databases and applications without necessarily getting into the complexity of development, without, programmers or any of that. And they can be so many different things. They can, track assets, complete with pictures, all of those sorts of things, and so many other things. SharePoint sites themselves can be internal company homepages for not just creating documents inside of traditional document libraries, but also creating wikis, for internal documentation, for training, for tests and things like that. There's a huge amount of capabilities that SharePoint offers, and it can all be accessed and analyzed and collaborated on through Microsoft Teams. So that just barely scratches the surface of what SharePoint and Teams look like kind of together. If we could go on for probably hours and hours and hours just on any one of those kinds of components. There's a lot of capabilities that your organization has. This is just this purpose today is just kind of give you an idea of what is out there and what is capable. Why I work with Kirchhoff Technologies? Well, RC Pets is an organization that we worked very closely with in doing a migration from traditional on-premises infrastructure to SharePoint. They've really embraced the Microsoft Modern Workplace, and they've been really successful with it. There's a great quote there from Andrew Wilkinson, who's the IT manager at RC Pets. So how do you even get started with all this? Well, a great way to do that is to book an initial consultation with us. We'd love to talk to you about where you're at with your Microsoft Modern Workplace implementation, your digital transformation in general. You can reach out to us, sales@kirchhofftech.ca, send us an email, or visit our website for more information on this as well. Kaya, do we have any questions?
We actually do not, but maybe somebody will write their question now.
No problem, no problem. All right.
It doesn't seem like anybody is typing, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Absolutely. What are we doing next month? Next month, we're going to be talking about getting scheduled with Microsoft Bookings. Microsoft Bookings is, again, built into Microsoft 365. It's part of the suite of applications that we're going over. You've got it already. No need for third-party services like Calendly or any of those other online booking applications. You've got it if you're a Microsoft customer with Microsoft Bookings. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into that next month. As always, the last Wednesday of the month at 11 o'clock Pacific time. Don't hesitate if you've got any questions on SharePoint, modern work, digital transformation, any of it. Give us a phone call, send us an email, sales@kirchhofftech.ca. You can book a discovery call directly on our website using Microsoft Bookings. Follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a lot of content, not just these webinars, but we also put out newsletters and things like that as well. And I'm a people person. I love connecting with people. So reach out and find me on LinkedIn and send me a request. I'd love to connect with you.
Isabel, if I could just stop you for a sec. We have a question from Carl. And Carl is asking, we want to create a personalized form for an event. Is it possible to add options for guests to select and then receive those submissions?
Absolutely, yes. So Microsoft Forms are capable of, when you create a public-facing form, you can do all kinds of things with that. But all of the things that you can collect in SharePoint, you can collect in that form. So that can be radio buttons, that can be drop-down lists, they can be required fields, not required fields. There's a lot of power you have about what can be entered, if it's like numeric, if it's selecting a date. All of that is totally customizable and something that you can put inside of your SharePoint list that you build your forms on top of.
Thank you very much. She says amazing.
Very good. Any other questions? Doesn't
seem like it.
All right. So again, find us, join us next month. Have a great afternoon.